Welcome to everyone to the Community Initiative's first webinar of the year. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Timothea, and it is a pleasure connecting with you all today. The webinar is called Staying Active Outside the Grant Cycle Council Programming, and we chose to start with this because as we continue to go out to visit you all, we're noticing that a lot of local cultural council members just want to learn more about how to stay active after the grant cycle closes. And, you know, we are thinking of making this a series, and a council program is a great opportunity for local cultural councils to stay active, among other things. And I just wanted to point out this lovely mural is a council program from the Chelsea Cultural Council. And this was a concerted effort with the public schools and a local artist as well. So before we start the presentation, we just want to do some general housekeeping. Make sure that your mute function is on to prevent any noises or distractions that may happen during the session. And so this is going to be the agenda for the meeting. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to the community initiative and other speakers who are going to be speaking during this webinar. And I'm also going to be giving just a general overview of what a council program is. And this information is taken from the LCC online toolkit. And we are joined by the Mansfield Cultural Council and the Medford Arts Council today. And they're going to be presenting some of their stories about their council programs. And at the end, we're going to have about 30 minutes for question and answers. So for the question and answer portion, there is a button at the bottom of your screen. And if you click that, you would be able to have this pop up. It's a box and you can type in your question here. I'm joined by Mina Kim. She is a program officer with the Community Initiative as well. And if you have any technical difficulties or questions, she'll be able to answer them right away. And if you have other questions and comments, you can save that for the last portion of the webinar. And we'll be able to read them out loud and kind of group them together and present them to other panelists. So we can avoid some overlap. So this is the Community Initiative team. I just wanted to introduce ourselves if we haven't been able to meet you all yet. This is Lisa, she's the program manager for local cultural councils and festivals. This is Luis, he's the program manager for cultural districts. And we have our program officers here. We have Mina, myself, we have Ricky, and we have Veronica. And this is a map of where we all work. Each of us, including Lisa and Luis, we all work with local cultural councils across the state. And so for me, I work in the greater Springfield area, greater Boston, and Nantucket. And Veronica works in the Berkshires, Plymouth County, North Central. Ricky works in Franklin County, South Central, and the Cape. Luis is taking on greater Merrimack Valley, Metro West. And Mina works in Hampshire County, north of Boston and Bristol. And Lisa also works in Boston, Martha's Vineyard, and Gosnold. And as you can see here, the pink layouts, those are the cultural districts. And it's exciting to see some of those grow throughout the state. And I just also wanted to present Eileen and Mark from the Mansfield Local Cultural Council and Danielle and Stephanie from the Medford Arts Council. They're going to be speaking a little bit later. And we basically chose these two councils because we wanted to focus on two different types of councils with two very different types of projects that show what's possible in terms of producing a council program. The Mansfield Cultural Council, they worked with the Historical Society to showcase the culture and history of Mansfield's downtown area in a very unique way. And the Medford Arts Council has done a great deal of work that centers public art, that enhances, the local infrastructure and landscape of the city, that ultimately really serves the broader community too. So we're really excited to have them here. So we just wanted to start off just with a general overview of what a council program is. And basically, again, this information is taken from the LCC online toolkit that you can access through mass-culture.org. And so basically, what is a council program? It is a cultural project or initiative that is organized by the local cultural council. And basically, you can, oh, all right, 1 second. So weird. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Again, so a local cultural council can spend up to 15% of its state allocation. And each year, local cultural councils are required to do a community input process that has, that will allow the council to figure out their council priorities and what the community wants to see happen. And basically, a council program, it might represent some larger project that has a wide public benefit, such as a work of public art, a festival, or an exhibition. And we just also wanted to point out earlier that in the community initiative, we also have the festivals program. And if you as a council wanted to do a festival for a council program, you would be eligible to not only apply for the festivals grant, but also to take that 15% to go towards that as well. And I think as we go out, a lot of people don't know that. So we just wanted to make sure that we put that in this presentation just to have you guys be aware. And basically, a council program is a really great way to create something that serves a community need. So what are the do's and don'ts of a council program? Council program funds cannot be spent on the following: administrative expenses, salaries or stipends for LCC members, late or ineligible grant applications, and council program funds cannot be reserved for the next grant cycle. And councils must carefully follow conflict of interest procedures. And, you know, conflict of interest law includes the prohibition of using one's LCC position to obtain benefits for oneself or others. And if you all have questions about that, you know, we'll be able to answer them at the end of the presentation.
I'm Mark Clamage, by the way. This is a project that we did last year. And basically, it started out very vague. It was suggested that we do some sort of publication about town history. And when I met up with the folks at the Historical Society, I found out that a lot of really cool buildings in Mansfield are just no longer there. They've been torn down, some of them burned down, some of them have been renovated out of recognition. And so my background is in architectural illustration. So what I decided to do was take the historical photos of these buildings, recreate them as 3D models, and then insert them into the current context so you would see what it looked like had that building, were that building still there. They're not there anymore, but this is what it would look like if they were. So next slide, please. Oh, well, there's all that stuff I just said. And then we ultimately created a calendar using 12 of the projects, and we were able to sell them. We used the money that we received from the Cultural Council to pay for printing of the calendars, and so they were very popular. It's all sold out, and in fact, people are coming to us. They want they want calendars, even though there aren't any. So we're printing out a couple more on a case-by-case basis, but it was very successful project. So next slide, please. So this is some of the text. This is what was written on the front of the calendar. And the guys at the Historical Society had been referring to it as Disappearing Mansfield. I called it Lost Mansfield. So I ended up doing 15 projects. All the projects can be used in multiple ways. I put together a web page that shows all the projects. I did some 3D printing because I can do that from the 3D models that we created. I did an animated tour of the downtown, the way it would look if those buildings were still there. And we recently did a sold out, if they were selling tickets, very, very popular presentation at the public library. Next slide, please. Eileen, feel free to say something.
I didn't want to jump in.
By all means, please do. So here's a sample project. And over on the right, you can see what the calendar looked like. This was the First Baptist Church, which was a beautiful, beautiful building. It burned down in the late 1980s, and they rebuilt on the same spot. It's not as nice a building, I'm sorry to say. They managed to salvage the church's bell, and that's what you see in the front. Next slide, please. So here is a historical photo that I used. This is one of the historical photos that I used to create the model. And the building in the background to the right is still there.
And I think it bears mentioning that this project is very much dependent upon how strong your historical group of people in your town are, or your city. They were immeasurably helpful with this, as you won't see the whole calendar, but they just have a plethora of pictures for us to draw from.
Yeah, they had a huge, and they had all the information I needed to put together the calendar. And so next slide, please. So this is what it looks like now. You can see they rescued the old church bell from the building, and that's all that's left. And they built a new church on the footprint of the old church. And then the next slide, there is the old church as it would appear if it were still standing in the location that it was. And that was Photoshop. That was all Photoshopped together. And so we did this for a bunch of projects around the town. I think that's pretty much it. Do we have anything else?
Well, one interesting thing that happened in our town, not only were there many fires over the years, as I'm sure every town has experienced, but we have a train station here in Mansfield that is really the heart of the town. And at one point, maybe 50 years ago, I'm not sure, the actual train station was moved, the highway was sort of sunken, and a whole bunch of buildings were taken out. And I found that to be the most fascinating thing, the recreation of that area that I've been here for 30 years and I didn't realize had happened.
Okay, why don't you read this last slide?
Okay, the calendar sales were a huge success. We sold over 60 calendars to the community and distributed an additional 30 throughout the town buildings. I think it's interesting that we're going to take part of those sales dollars, and we're talking about, with the downtown committee now, putting up a structure that is a large oversized train for children to play on in a small pocket park that we have downtown, to tie that all in and continue to tie it in. The Historical Society and Cultural Council had a joint presentation that was very successful. Mark from the Cultural Council shared the computer graphics that went into the publication, while the Historical Society shared perspectives on the buildings pasts. And the meeting was a lot of fun because so many people came and shared their past memories of those buildings, very old people, not so old people. It was really a nice community event. This project has brought more attention and interest into the downtown's past and into newer forms of artistic expression.
And I think that's it.
Mark, were you going to walk us through the full tour? Oh, here we go.
Oh, we do have the animation.
This is fine.
Yeah, okay. So here are all the buildings that were in the model. The dark gray buildings were 3D models that were provided by the Historical Society, and they're really nice. Unfortunately, I had to strip the photo textures out of them because it just blew up the model. The pink buildings are little sugar cube models that are just planted on the footprint shown on the map. The map is right out of Google Maps, and you can see how it's all stitched together. And then there's just some iconic buildings that once stood, now still partially stand or are completely gone. We're coming up on the train station. There's the existing train station. This is the old train station. You're gonna go? And then kind of shooting around other parts of town. That's the old firehouse, which was replaced by the new firehouse, which has recently been replaced by the newest firehouse. So now one of the things that we're trying to do with the cultural committee is to save the firehouse that replaced that firehouse. And we'll see how that goes. And then there's just an overhead view of the whole thing.
The question was asked about the cost. Mark, would you be able to address that?
The cost?
The cost
Of doing this, it was free.
It was free because you did a lot of work. It was
free because I donated my time, because I and Christopher donated our time.
Yeah, so Christopher took the pictures, you did the animation, and the historical committee council spent hours and hours going through their pictures. So really it was a labor of love, if that answers the question. But we did have to print out the calendars, and we made some money back by selling the calendars. So exact dollars, I don't know that we can
change
give
the slide. Eileen,
No. Hi, thanks to Timothea. So my name is Danielle Moriarty, and I'm the co-chair with Stephanie McKay, and we're representing the Medford Arts Council. You can move to the next slide, please. So just a little bit about who we are. Obviously, an LCC for Medford, but one thing that we've really advocated for within our community is receiving additional allocations from the city of Medford. And this past year, the mayor has increased our allocation to $60,000 a year, which is very exciting for us. And it's really enabled us to pursue a lot of these other community projects that are outside of our granting. So in addition to the 15% that we can allocate from the Mass Cultural Council, we also use some of the 60,000 to put towards our own initiatives. Next slide. And these are just our members currently. We are a bit of a skeleton crew right now, but this is the team that's really putting together a lot of these projects that are happening outside the grant cycle that I will talk about in just a minute. So next slide, please. So this past year, this was a really exciting and fun project that we did last summer of 2019. And we took 10 electrical boxes that are all located in Medford Center, and used community input to determine what was going on them. So Sophie Tuttle is a muralist in Medford, and she put together a survey that went out to our network about local flora and fauna that happened along the Mystic River, and incorporated them into these, she calls them electrical box landscapes. And in addition to that, incorporated poetry, haikus by a Medford poet, Gary Roberts. So each of the little haikus there goes along with the animals and plants that were picked out for each of these electrical box landscapes. And this was really well received. We got a lot of great feedback from the community. And I think the thing that makes it successful is that they're all kind of clustered together in this one area in kind of Medford Center. That kind of makes these great connections while also being singularly impactful. So they were a great success for this, our most recent project. Next slide. So this was a project that we completed in the fall of 2018. It's called the Mystic Musical Fence, and it was in collaboration with Patronicity, and then also an artist, his name is Daniel Joseph, who runs an organization called the Pick Up Music Project. And he does a lot of kind of spontaneous creative placemaking through music and sound. And so this is a fence that he installed along McDonald's Park, which is along the Mystic River in Medford. And this was a pretty lengthy project from the day that DJ reached out to us with an interest to pursue this, and then the day that it was installed, I think was about 18 months to 24 months. There was a lot of work that went involved in a lot of coordinating and collaborating with you know, the Parks Department and DPW, and you know, determining the location that would be best. It required a lot of players, but we're really excited that it was able to come to completion, and people are really enjoying it. Next slide. This was just a really fun, just very rogue. I mean, we all kind of banded together and did this ourselves. This is very DIY. So again, we worked with Gary Roberts, who did a lot of these haikus, and then we used Rainworks, which for people who aren't familiar, Rainworks is a spray paint essentially that is only activated and visible during when it gets wet, so when it rains. So we tried to incorporate these in areas that were high trafficked, but also, you know, during rain and storms that they could be highly visible. And we kind of just went around and placed them throughout the city in locations that we were hoping would get people's attention. And like I said, this was pretty low cost, pretty quick. You know, a few of the members just got together and did this over a couple afternoons in various locations. So really low budget and fun, kind of whimsical way to, you know, engage with public art. Next, yeah, next. So this is an upcoming project that we're collaborating with the City of Medford's Office of Energy and Environment. And Stephanie, I don't know if you want to explain a little bit about this. You've been working a little bit more closely on this than I have.
This project was spearheaded by Sophie Tuttle, one of our members, and it was a response to the Office of Energy and Environment's repurposed, they had to cap a section of behind a middle school that contained lead. And so they had to put a cement cap on it, but they had to solve the problem with a community survey from the residents about what they wanted to do with that area once it was covered with cement. So there were several surveys and outreach to the residents that live in that area. They expressed concern that they didn't want there to be a lot of noise. There was a concern because they lived there. They didn't want it to be a park. But they did want some art. And so Sophie proposed a labyrinth, a quiet, participatory place where people can have quiet contemplation, but it was still not engage, it would still be engaging the public, but not involve a lot of volume of noise to disturb the residents. And so yeah, that's where we are with this project. It's been funded by the Chamber of Commerce. The City Council has approved funds, and it's a collaboration with the Medford Arts Council.
Yep, and also funding coming from the Community Preservation Committee to facilitate funding this as well. Next slide. Stephanie, do you want to talk a little bit about Art Week 2020 and the Medford Arts Council?
Yes, my co-chair reached out to have us partner with Art Week, and we got some suggestions from community stakeholders at our meetings that they had been to the Asheville, North Carolina Drum Festival, and they were interested in starting something like that in Medford. So we reached out to the organization Cache, which is a local community organization called Arts Across Medford. Is that correct, Danielle?
It's the Coalition for Arts, Culture, and a Healthy Economy. They're a 501c3 nonprofit that we do a lot of overlapping work with.
And they were excited to partner with us, and we are going to be holding this first time 3-hour drum festival that will engage the public, and anybody at any skill level who would like to participate can come and play drums and play music together.
Yep, so this is kind of an overview of what we have been doing to kind of engage with our community outside of our distribution of grants and different ways that we can just facilitate and activate those local priorities. A big one that we received from our community when we did our community input survey was public art. And so we did focus quite a bit on that. But for this Art Week 2020, we really wanted to do something that was really accessible to people, and, rhythmic percussion, drumming, we thought would be a really great accessible way to get people activated and engaged in a way that is a little bit different than maybe the typical notion of public art, really thinking of something like our electrical box landscapes and the murals. But that should conclude what we have for you guys.
I wanted to add that Upbeat Drum Festival was also engaging the public parks, which was part of the open space plan that we had done in previous surveys.
Stephanie, could you repeat that and speak into the mic?
I was saying that the Upbeat Drum Festival was also in line with the open space plan, which was to activate our public parks.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle and Stephanie, for presenting, your council programs. And I think Medford is, a very exciting city with a lot of changes happening, and it does really show how much you're able to work with a lot of other community partners, especially with the municipality. So thank you again.
Of course.
Just to wrap up before Q&A, we just wanted to talk about the benefits of a council program, because there are a good amount. And so first off, I think it helps clarify and understand community benefit and public benefit. It addresses community needs, and it provides opportunities to build a relationship with the municipality and community partners. And honestly, I think the Mansfield Cultural Council and the Medford Arts Council, their programs did really demonstrate kind of all of these. And it does also raise the visibility of the LCC program and the council itself. And it was interesting, before we invited these two councils to join us, we didn't really know that well, we did, but it was unique in a way that each of the councils had their own logos. And, it's not a requirement, but it's a great way to engage the community to help, design a logo and also to make council stand apart as well. So it was just an added bonus. And it also enhances the capacity to fundraise. And this is a very interesting case. With Mansfield Cultural Council, I think Eileen and Mark demonstrated well that their council program offered them the platform to do some fundraising for the council. And that's something that we do encourage councils to do outside of the grant cycle. You know, our allocation to you all, it is limited in a sense, and you know, you can always try to get a municipal match from the municipality, but also fundraising is a great option too, to strengthen capacity. So right now we're going to open that up for Q&A. A lot of you all have been typing questions, and thank you so much for that. But yeah, we just wanted to take the rest of the time to do that. And if you had other questions for us or for the councils, this would be a great time.
So we have a question here. Is the funding for council programs above and beyond what we receive from MCC, or does it come out of the allocation? And so councils can use up to 15% of their fiscal year allocation. So let's say the state in fiscal year 20 provided $5,800. So you could take up to 15% of that amount. However, we do have councils who are able to leverage that funding by getting funding from the municipality, or perhaps working with a partner organization in the community, and sharing the cost of putting on a program or an initiative. So there are different buckets of resources that you can draw from, but for the council program, you can always use up to 15% of the allocation. So we have a question for Medford from Worcester, I believe. And so Worcester Arts Council is wondering if you had any challenges when it came to overcoming some of the insurance requirements associated with some of your public art projects. If you could talk about that a bit.
Sure. So yes, I would say that it depends. We have tried to do certain mural projects that, in terms of permitting and insurance, have not been able to come to fruition, primarily because it really comes down to the jurisdiction of state versus city property, I have found. But I know in the past there's been some times where we have a location like, near a business or on a business, but, a portion of where we're going to be painting is actually on state property, and asking permission from, state either transit authority or public works to basically paint on their property has not worked out for us. But I would say for the most part, we have a fairly good working relationship with people within the city of Medford. We actually, up until recently, had a really wonderful business and cultural liaison that worked in the city of Medford, who worked with us to make sure that, we had everything in place that we needed, permits and insurance in order to make stuff happen. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And right now we have a question. Are there any guidelines or limitations to developing a local cultural council logo? And from the state, we don't have any limitations or guidelines surrounding that. But basically, us as program officers, if you want to run a design idea through us, we'd be more than happy to look over something and help you figure that out. Yeah, so we have another question.
So Mansfield and Medford, you actually both have your own custom design logos. Would you like to speak a little bit about what made you decide to create a logo, and how or if it's helped in terms of raising the visibility? And so we're first going to start with Mansfield, so Eileen and Mark.
Our logo, I've been with the Cultural Council for 2 years, and it was in place when I got here, and it hasn't changed in any way. It's basically the Mass Cultural Council logo, the Mansfield town seal, and the words Mansfield Cultural Council. And that green is kind of like, we call it Mansfield green. That's the color that they use in all the publications and stuff like that. So pretty simple and straightforward in our case.
We've asked around who actually designed it and when, but we haven't gotten to the bottom of that yet. We just continue to use it. We have a banner, as someone else had mentioned, that we bring to, for instance, our grantee reception that we have. And when we were having a booth to sell the calendars, we would use it for that. So it does help boost, as you said, the, can't think of the word.
The visibility.
Visibility, that's the word, thank you.
And how about Medford?
Sure. So like Mansfield's, our logo came before my time, but essentially the Medford Arts Council had used monies to pay a graphic designer to come up with a logo. And the logo, I don't know if you guys remember seeing it, but it's essentially a bluish box, and there's a squiggly lines that go through it that are supposed to represent the Mystic River, which is a big part of Medford's community and identity. And I think it also kind of looks like the shape of an M. But it was, and I think it's been very helpful in terms of our visibility and our brand. Similarly, we use it when we go to West Medford Open Studios, the Mystic River Festival, Tufts Community Day. We have a banner. We actually, a few years ago, put together some totes and t-shirts as well to kind of have a little swag when we went to these places, mostly for members, you know, so people could identify us in a crowd. But yeah, I think it's been very helpful to kind of have our own brand.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we have a question. Does any cultural council fund a poet laureate program throughout the state? So Massachusetts does not have a statewide designation, but there are cities, off the top of my head, I know Somerville, Cambridge, and Boston. Their cultural councils do support a poet laureate designation in the city. And that just takes a little bit of relationship building and a presentation possibly from the cultural council. And us as program officers, we are also able to help support those efforts if that is a council program that you want to pursue.
So another person is asking whether 5% of the administrative funds can be used to print a banner. And yes, it is considered an administrative use. So you can put the 5% in your administrative funds into something like creating banners for your council. And we have some questions around, you know, whether or not these are the first projects that the councils have undertaken, or if it's been the first of many projects, or if you had already done several projects before and then you use your 15% to further develop a project. Maybe, yeah, if Medford wants to go first.
Sure. I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure, so it's, has the council done any other projects, or is this the first? And so when you first created a council project, had you already done other projects before and then decided to organize a council project? Or did you start off with the council project that developed into all these multiple projects that you have now?
Yeah, so I would say the first, again, this was prior to my time on the Medford Arts Council, but I would say the first kind of experiment with doing a community project was several years ago, and the council had decided to create these basically just light post banners. And they put out a call for art and had a bunch of artists and designers submit ideas on how to represent Medford Square. And this, you know, in a way that's a little bit less civic focused and more like art and design focused. And so there was a call for art, and then they, you know, reviewed the submissions and I think chose multiple designs and had them installed on banners located in primarily in downtown, the Medford Square, Medford Center. And so I think that was the first kind of like dipping their toe into public art. And I believe, I don't know the specifics, that was primarily done through the 15% allocation through the state funds. But like I said, once we started receiving additional monies through this city of Medford, that really kind of got the juices flowing in terms of what ideas and what projects we had on, you know, in our heads, and how realistically we could accomplish certain things.
Perfect.
Eileen?
I am newer to the council than Mark is, and I believe the first I heard of our project was through Mark and Christopher, who did the photography. But I really don't believe there were projects in the past. I can't recall any, and as I said, I've lived here for a long time. Maybe Mark can speak to that. Mark, do you know of any past projects that have been done by the board?
I do not.
No, I don't. I think it was mostly the grant cycle in the past.
Great. And we actually have a comment from Tina Gaines, who just wanted to share that the Harwich Cultural Council, this is going back to the logo discussion, but the Harwich Cultural Council had a logo designed by a student through their local technical high school as an internship project. And they were able to honor her work at a grant reception a couple of years ago. And so keep in mind that as you're thinking of both logo design, but then also organizing council programs, to, you know, seek out youth voices as one part of the population in your community, who can be a valuable resource when it comes to informing the Cultural Council about, you know, what needs exist when it comes to arts and culture in your communities. And also provide resources and their particular skill sets and experiences.
So we also had a question, what is the difference between a cultural council and an arts council? And our end, there are 329 local cultural councils, and the name is something that can be negotiated with the municipality if that's what you choose. And I think just for time's sake, we just want to be mindful. We have about 7 more minutes, so we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll close it out. And if you have any other questions, you'll be able to email or call us with any follow-up. So we're just looking, 1 second.
Would you mind talking a little bit about your community input process that you have when it comes to informing your council program?
Who was that to?
So Danielle and Stephanie, could you talk a little bit about the community input process that you did with the community?
We created surveys through Google, and then we put up a link to the survey, and then we emailed it to grantees. And we also, what else do we do, Danielle?
We also have done so at, for instance, at this past summer at the Mystic, these are less formal options, but at the Mystic River Festival, which is a festival that's put on by the Coalition for arts, culture, and a healthy economy in Medford, we had out these 4 different kind of prompts and things that people want to see happening in Medford relating to arts and culture, and little glass pebbles that they could put into bottles that represented each of these 4 different kind of priorities, and just had people contribute and say, you know, what do you care about? And, you know, just kind of looked at what jars were the most filled at the end of the day. And then in addition, we, during our community receptions, we'll also have, you know, just a community engagement, you know, board or section where people can just write on sticky notes things that they want to see, things that they want happening in Medford relating to arts and culture. So, you know, we do the survey, which is great. It gives us a lot of great quantitative data. And then, you know, we have these other avenues where we're collecting more qualitative information and relating that back into, you know, what our local priorities should be and how are we best serving the needs of our community.
Just to build on that, we relied heavily on our sticky notes as well. We have a Mansfield Family Fun Night in July, and we have a holiday fair in November, and also we had a fall festival, at which time we had tables out and we would have a big board with the question, the survey questions, and just had people answer on sticky notes, and we did get some feedback that way.
Perfect, thank you. We have a question from Rachel Kurtz, and she is asking, I like knowing what other councils are doing. Does MCC have any other opportunities for council members to share, a meeting, a listserv where people share? And the answer is yes. Currently, we are working to do convenings for each of the counties that we serve, and we'll be able to keep you all posted. But this is something, if you all, we do encourage councils to work together. Let's say, you know, Medford and Somerville are right next to each other. It would be worth reaching out to councils in your surrounding areas to pull something together as well. And if that is something you're interested in, we'd be able to support that. And the in-person meetings we think are very informative, and it gives people a way to really connect on a different level as opposed to over the internet or on the phone. But we're constantly trying to develop new ways to kind of get people to communicate and, you know, build community through that way. So that is an excellent question and a great suggestion, and we're definitely keeping that in mind actively as we move forward.
Councils who, you know, hadn't thought of doing a council program, and so what they did was go on little mini field trips to surrounding communities to see what others were up to. And through those field trips, and of course through connecting with us to act as, you know, a facilitator for LCC relationships, there has become kind of this growing network of LCCs who, you know, who want to continually like build their ideas, to build their creative processes. And Lisa, we do see your question about community input. It's very timely that you asked that question because we're actually organizing another webinar specifically about community input. Unfortunately, we are out of time right now, but just you know, broadly speaking, community input can be done in various ways. It can be, you know, an online survey, a paper survey. You could also set up shop in cafes, the fire station, at community events where a large, you know, population of the community convenes and gathers. And you can also have, you know, public, kind of like an open house for LCCs. You can host an open house at your town hall or city hall, or really wherever you would like to gather community. And so it's always great when you use a combination of different techniques so that you're able to do outreach to the broadest, you know, subset of your different communities in your towns and cities. So we will talk more about that, and we'll definitely let everyone know when we schedule that webinar.
And thank you all again for joining, and we will be sending out a revised version of the webinar just so Mark's emails aren't public. like. But again, thank you to the Medford Arts Council and the Mansfield Cultural Council, and we look forward to speaking to you all in our next webinar. And definitely, if we haven't met yet, if cultural councils and their program officers haven't met, it's a great way just to get the ball rolling, and we'll be able to support your efforts and vision for the cultural councils as well. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.